Hi everyone, for our video today we'll be talking about these three brushes from Sonia G. So I have here the Master Face, the Face Pro, and the Inochige Pro. Now these three brushes are not new to the market. They have been released years ago, but they are relatively new to me. I have just purchased them recently and have been using them for the past few months now, and I've actually enjoyed using them, and they work very well with my makeup sentiments. Now I've actually wanted to create a video for this, but for the past few months, if you are a food lover, you would have known that there were a lot of new brushes released that not only from Sonia G, by the way. So if I had any plans of making a video for these three brushes, they kept on being pushed back. But I'm so glad I'm able to do this now because this is very special for me, because having these three brushes right now kind of completes my collection of Sonia G brushes, except for her limited edition release, because I could not get all of them. Because if you've been following me here on YouTube for quite some time, if you purchase anything from Beautylish, especially if you are from the Philippines like me, there's a purchase cap for all the products that you buy from them. So if there's any brush that sells above $180, I could not get them. So that's the only thing that's unfortunate. But anywho, that's beside the point. I'm just so glad that I'm doing this video right now, because it's time for us to talk about these three brushes. Okay, now these three brushes, by the way, are still available for purchase at Beautylish. So if you're interested, all the links are down on the description box. Okay, alright, so before I talk about these brushes individually, I'm just gonna put on a hint of foundation and concealer, because I believe I am going to be showing you guys how I like to use these brushes as well. Okay, all right. Okay, so I have just applied a hint of loose setting powder in my under eye area to set the under eye concealer, but I'm gonna keep the rest of my face powder free, because as we continue to make this video, I will actually be showing you guys how I use these brushes for. Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna start by using the Face Pro first. And the Face Pro is actually very beautiful, and it belongs to the Pro series of Sonia G. Now the brush head here is at an angle, and it is made of undyed and dyed Chikuhodo goat hair. So it's actually very soft to the touch, and as you guys can see, it's very fluffy and very airy. So this is actually great to apply powder products may be loose, pressed, but because of the airy nature of the brush head here, you're going to expect a very light coverage of powder on your skin. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to apply some loose powder first all over my face. So I'm just picking up some of the powder here on the cap, and of course you can't see it because it's a loose translucent powder, and I'm just going to lightly buff it all over. Now this brush is actually great to use, especially if you're someone who has very oily skin, because the goat hair fibers here will just really absorb all of the excess oil from your skin. So as you guys can see, the Face Pro actually just dances very beautifully on my skin, and it's actually very soft and feels very luxurious, and it's actually not disturbing all the products that I applied before applying the powder. And as you guys can see, my skin has mattified just a little bit, but we still see this very nice natural glow that my skin actually has. So if you're someone who doesn't like the matte look, then having a brush like this is actually perfect for you, because it just gives you the right amount of coverage, just enough to actually set the products that you used on your skin. And of course, it also has enough strength in the brush head to be able to buff out any excess powder that has landed on your face. Look at that, very nice, well-balanced application of loose powder. Very beautiful. Okay, so I'm gonna return to this a little bit later, okay? Because at this point, I'm going to be talking now about the Master Face Brush. So the Master Face Brush belongs to the Sky series of Sonia G, because of course we have the blue handle here on the brush. And the brush head here is made of undyed and dyed Chikuhodo goat hair as well. Now it has a very nice rounded shape, and the bristles here at the tips is actually also very airy. So like, to me, when I see a brush like this, I already know that it's going to impart a very light coverage of powder on the face. Because for example, if I wanted to have more coverage of powder on my face, I would get a denser brush, and that would be the PF4 brush from Chikuhodo, as you guys can see here. Because if I'm just going to press the Master Face here at the palm of my hand, as you guys can see, it actually splays out a little bit, but you can see that there is a strength at the core of the bristle here. So when you press it, it's going to apply the powder on the face, and then the bristles are just going to splay out to be able to help you blend out the product effectively on the face. Now, as I've said, if I wanted to pile more powder on my face, I'll get the PF4, because this is actually a denser brush in comparison to the Master Face. And this actually, splays out quite nicely as well, as you guys can see here. And it doesn't have a lot of movement, so this will actually really help you to pile on the powder on the face, and it will actually give you more coverage. So if you're someone who doesn't need a lot of coverage on your skin, but you just need the right amount, the Master Face is actually the brush for you. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys an example. So I usually use the Master Face brush for powder foundations, and I have here my MAC Studio Fix in NC35, and I'm going to lightly press the brush head here on the pan. And this is how much product the brush head actually picks up. So it really has some strength, wherein it's actually enabling you to pick up hard pressed powders like powder foundation products. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lightly press the brush head all over my face, and I'm just concentrating it here, in the areas where I want to have more coverage, also to mattify my face. And then when I'm happy with that, I'm just going to use the brush and buff out the product onto my skin so that it will just blend it out nicely. So I'm going to pick up some more, and I'm going to add a little bit of that here on my forehead, my temple area, and I'm just really building coverage. And when I'm quite happy, I'm just going to buff out the product. Alright, so as you guys can see, this part of my face has more coverage now, and it also looks matter than this side on my face. But as you guys can see, you can still see my skin peeking through. So this brush actually doesn't really deliver a ton of product on my skin. Because for example, this is the PF4 brush, and I'm just gonna load it here on the pan, and I'm just gonna press it here onto my face, and I'm sure you guys can see already the difference in coverage that these two brushes actually deliver on my skin. Look at that. So I actually have more coverage with the PF4 brush. So if I need to create more opacity on my skin, this is the brush that I would use. Now, the other thing that I like using the Master Face for is actually applying my Guerlain Meteorites. So I have here the color number 3 Warm. So I'm just gonna tap the brush here into the pearl. Now, because this is made of undyed and dyed Chikuhodo goat hair, and because the brush head here is actually quite dense, it's actually able to break down the pearls of the Guerlain Meteorites. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to apply the finishing powder very lightly here on my cheek area, and that will just really add a hint of warmth on my skin, and it's going to bring back the glow as well, because after all, we used a powder foundation. So I'm also going to do that here on the other side of my face, just so that we can see this nice glow all over. Now, I just recently talked about the new Guerlain Meteorites. I'm going to put the link down on my description box if you're interested to know more about the newly reformulated Guerlain Meteorites, okay? Right, so I'm just going to buff the product well into my skin, and I'm just going to blend it all over right now. Okay, so look at that. The Master Face is a very nice brush. The brush head is actually still very soft despite on how dense it is, and it's not disturbing all of the products that I used earlier before I applied the Guerlain Meteorites. Okay, very nice and very airy. I love using this brush for this purpose. Now, of course, you can use the master face to apply color on the face, may it be bronzers or blushes, but on a personal level, I actually don't like to use a brush like this to do so because my real estate on my face is actually very small, so I need a much more smaller brush to actually apply color on my face, especially with the fact that I actually need to apply color in the highest points of my cheeks, because if I apply any color here on the apples of my cheeks, it's just going to give me an under eye highlight, which I don't like. So anywho, just for demonstration purposes, I have here this Nars blush. This is in Deep Throat. Now I'm just gonna press the brush head lightly here on the pan, and I'm gonna apply a little bit of that color here on the highest points of my cheeks. Now because the brush head here is quite compact, it's going to apply the color in a very specific area on my face. So I'm actually exerting some effort in being controlling on how the brush actually lands here on my cheeks. So I'm just tapping it in circular motions here. And then when I'm quite happy with the placement, I'm going to buff off the excess color here at the back of my hand, and I'm going to blend it well into my cheekbones. So it's actually blending quite nicely. So I'm going to pick up a little bit more of the blush color here, and I'm just going to tap it some more, just so that we have a much more intense application of color. And then I'm just gonna buff it well into my cheeks and try to blend it well into the finishing powder that I applied earlier. Look at that. So the master face will still impart a very nice soft application of color, but just make sure that you exert control when you're actually applying it on your face. But of course, as you guys can see, the color of this blush is actually quite light. So if you have a much more intense blush color, you might need to exert more effort in ensuring that you actually blend out the color quite nicely on the cheeks. Okay? Alright, so I hope that's helpful, because right now we're going to move on to the next brush. Now the next brush, of course, is the Face Pro brush. Now the Face Pro brush is actually an amazing brush, and I don't really have a lot of this angled brush shape design in my collection, and I'm actually so happy on how this actually works for me. So of course, normally when you see a brush head like this, you'd actually use it to apply bronzer or contouring application on the face. But before I actually do that, I actually want to show you guys how well this brush actually applies blush on my cheeks. So I'm going to be using a matte blush for this. So I'm just going to tap the brush lightly onto the brush head, because as you guys can see, it picks up quite a good amount of pigment, especially with the fact that this is a matte blush. So it's actually softer than most blushes that I have on my table right now. So I have here the color on the middle of the brush head, and then I'm just going to tap it very lightly here at the highest points of my cheeks. And as you guys can see on how well blended and how softly this brush actually applies color on the cheeks. Now because the brush head here is actually quite wide, so when you actually press it, it's actually going to really bloom quite widely here on your cheeks. So if you actually want to have a very softly applied blush color on your cheeks, this is a great brush to use, because as you press it, the edges of the brush head here will just really blend out the color, and it will just really help you to diffuse the color quite nicely. As you guys can see, the Face Pro actually applies a very nice soft diffused color all over my cheeks, also in a much more wider and a bigger area on my face. So if you have a much more bigger real estate on your face, then Face Pro is actually a great brush to use to apply color on your cheeks in a very diffused manner. But if you have a much more smaller real estate, the Master Face can actually be a good brush to use for that. But just make sure that you're actually quite controlled when you're applying the color using this brush, so that you still get this very nice soft and diffused color application on your face. Okay? And the final brush that we're going to be talking about is the Inochige Pro. Now, the brush head of the Inochige Pro is actually made using dyed Chikuhodo goat hair. And as you guys can see, now that I'm running my finger through the brush head, it actually snaps back into position quite nicely. So it actually has a very resilient core. But like, as you guys can see, the tips of the brush head here is actually very airy. So we actually know that in doing that alone, this brush will actually apply a very nice diffused amount of color on the face. But won't be fooled by the airiness of the tips here, because if I just press the brush into the palm of my hand, I'm sure you guys can see that it splays out, but there's actually some resistance that I can feel here in the core of the brush head. So this is where the strength of this brush head actually lies. So if you use this brush for color application, when you press the brush into a pan, it's actually going to pick up the color in the middle of the pan, and when you apply the color on your face, you're going to see that it's going to apply a very specific color on the area where your brush actually landed. So again, you have to be very, very careful, and you have to be very light-handed. But because of the strength of the core of the bristle of this brush, you're actually also able to buff it out and to blend it out. Look at that, very nice diffuse amount of color, and it's also blending very well with all of the blush colors that I used on this cheek. Okay, now let me just buff out the excess color here on the microfiber towel. Because of the brush design of the Inochige Pro, you can use this for an array of products, may it be for bronzers, blushers, like big gelée powders, big gelée brushes. It really depends on how you load the product into the brush head. So for example, I have here a baked finishing powder from Laura Mercier, and if I just load a little bit of the brush with this product on the side, I can actually use this brush to apply this finishing powder here on my under eye area, because it just fits quite nicely here in this area. Look at that, and it already delivers a very nice amount of product in this part. So I'm also going to do that here in this side of my face. But one thing that I love with the Inochige Pro is because of its dyed Chikuhodo goat hair, and because of its resiliency, it actually enables me to blend out the color and to buff it out at the same time. Look at that. Look how easy it is for me to blend out the product quite nicely, and I don't get a lot of product onto my skin. I don't pick up a lot of the product as well from the pan. Again, a very well balanced brush in my opinion. Alright, so at this point I'm going to use some contouring powder. So I'm just going to press the brush head lightly onto the pan here, and I am just going to lightly run the brush head here onto my cheekbones. I'm going to pick up some more, and I'm also going to do that on the other side. So as you guys can see, it's actually already applying a very nice diffused amount of contouring powder on my cheeks. And because of the strength of the core of this brush head, it also enables me to blend it out effectively. Look at that. Look how nice and soft and diffused this contouring powder is applied on my face. So I'm just going to apply a little bit of that here on my non-existent hairline, and also here. Okay, so I'm just going to buff that now and blend it so that we have this very nice diffused amount of color on my face. And if I so desire, I can also use this brush to apply the contour powder here on my jawline and here on the underside of my chin. Again, just be very careful with how much pressure you exert when you are picking up color or product using the Inochige Pro, because it's a very, very resilient brush. So again, let me just show you guys what I mean. So if I really over press the brush, and I'm gonna apply that here, it's going to apply a very strong amount of coloration. Okay, so but if you're finding that you're scared because of this, then you can always use the Face Pro, because the Face Pro has airier bristles, and for sure this will apply a much more relaxed color application here on the face, especially contouring products. Okay, look at that. Look how strong this Inochige Pros impart color, especially if you pick up too much product. So again, be very light-handed when you are using a brush like this, especially if you're using it together with a contouring product. Okay, so let me just buff out the color here. So I'm picking up the master face for this, and I have some loose translucent powder, and I'm just gonna tap the loose powder into that, and I'm just gonna try to blend it out and soften it out. And just to blend everything together, I'm going to get my Face Pro, and I have some loose translucent powder, and I'm just going to buff a little bit of that here on top of my cheek area just to blend everything out. Look at that, fantastic. And I'm going to also do that on this part of my face. Alright, so I believe we have come to the end of my vlog for today, but before I let you guys go, let me just say that I love how these brushes actually work in tandem with me and with my makeup sentiments, because they just really help me in applying the right amount of color on my face, and they work very well with an array of powder products, may it be loose powder, pressed powder, hard pressed powders, finishing powders, big gelée powders. They work extremely well, and with all the knowledge that I have gained of using Fude for all these years, I would really say that I should have bought these brushes first when I started out in my Fude journey, because they have proven to be very essential in my makeup routine right now, and I do have to say that they are actually worth their money, and I just love them, like super love them. So I'm very happy that I have gotten them right now, because they are now an integral part of my brush kit. Yeah, so I believe that's it for me today. So if you have any more questions how I use each of these makeup brushes from Sonia G, please let me know down in the comments box, and let's have a conversation about it, okay? And if you do happen to have any of these brushes with you, please let me know how you use them and what you like to use them for, because I might learn something from you as well, okay? Alright, so I'm gonna let you guys go now. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope that you're having a good day wherever you are. Bye!